Welcome to the Restoration Road, and if you cannot tell, I have with me today my father, Dean Verl Kruse, and my brother, Stuart Allen Kruse, named after Senator Allen Bloom. Dad?
Yes.
I want to talk today about auction stories.
Yes.
So why don't you just get us going and pick one?
Well, I got lots of them, I guess, but one was interesting as we were auctioning off a home in Woketville, Indiana, and we'd give a big pitch, and this is the home that everybody wants and would like to have, and you know, this is your own castle, and you could live longer if you live here with this very beautiful yard and the trees. And the guy stepped up and bid, and nobody else bid. And so he got it on one bid, and when I said sold, he was, oh boy, and he took 2 steps backward and fell over with a heart attack.
Really?
And he laid there, and I didn't know if he was dead or what. And they called the ambulance, and so they hauled him away to the hospital. And the owner's standing there, and he says, is my home sold to him or what? And I said, you know, I'm not sure about that. We said sold. I suspect if he lives, he's got it bought, but... And the owner said, well, he was supposed to pay some money down today. He sure can't do that. I said, no, let's go talk to the runner-up bidder, because there was a high bidder before that. So we went over and talked to him, and he was pretty nice about it. He said, yeah, if the guy doesn't make it and doesn't want it, I'll take it at my last bid. So we said, well, would you fill something out and sign a contract to that effect? And he said, let's see whether he makes it or not, but I would take it. So I thought, well, he's going to try to get a little more off. Mm-hmm. And so we waited, and the seller had sold everything he had. He was going to Florida, and he didn't know what to do. He had no bed to sleep in or anything. And I said, well, why don't you get a hotel for a couple, 3, 4 days? We'll see how this works. Well, the guy came to in about 2 or 3 days. I don't remember exactly. And he blinked his eyes a few times, and the first thing he said was, did I get that house? Well, the doctor said, yeah, you got it. He said, have them come over here and I'll sign the agreement and pay the money, the earnest money. And so we did, and the guy was under an auction content and reached out and signed the purchase agreement, and he bought it.
Amazing.
Yes, it was.
Amazing.
It was scary for a while.
Do you have a favorite story that comes to mind at the auctions?
There's lots of them, but probably just starting with one of the first auctions I ever did. I think we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and
I think I know what you're going to say.
Getting towards the end of the auction, and Dad called me up and said, why don't you sell the last few cars or whatever? And so I got up there, and he'd always have me stand there to kind of get used to being in front of the crowd before I took the seat. So I stood there getting acclimated, and then he said, okay, here you go, and he sat down and introduced me. And as I'm auctioneering, he was telling me what to say in the background, like he would typically say. I'd be 3,500 to go 4,000, and he'd say, one of the best cars you've ever seen in the world. And I'd say, one of the best cars I've ever seen. And, 4,000, 4,500, and he'd say, wire wheels. And I'd say, wire wheels. And so it just kept going along like that. Pretty soon we got to where the seller wanted to sell the car. And they said, okay, so lift the reserve. We're selling the car. And I said, we're lifting the reserve. We're going to sell the car today. And Dad goes, now we're going to find out what you're really made of. And over the microphone I said, now we're going to find out what you're really made of. He goes, no, I was talking to you. So, but must have worked because the car brought more money, so
yep.
Got the bidder shaped up, I guess.
Do you remember you were auctioning somewhere and Dad had auctioned before you and he had not sold many cars? Do you remember that? And you got up and he said, ladies and gentlemen, my son Stuart Kruse will sell today, and we'll see how well he can do. Do you remember what you said?
I can't do any worse than you.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I know
another thing Dad would do is we'd be at an auction, and a fellow auctioneer would show up, had his own auction company, and Dad would introduce him and say, ladies and gentlemen, so-and-so's here today, one of the greatest auctioneers in all the world, one of the greatest bid callers you'll ever hear in your life. In fact, we're going to invite him up here. Why don't you sell a car for us? And he'd get up there, and he'd sound terrible. And we would say, Dad, why in the world did you introduce that guy and call him the best there's ever been, the best bid caller in the world? And he said, Because if they think he's the best, what do you think they think about me after I'm wrecking? They're going to think I'm really good. I said, that's pretty smart.
For those who don't know, Dad, you have auctioned 7,000 auctions, you think? More?
Yeah, probably 7,500,
And
8,000.
your first one was when Russell had you along at an auction and he had to go to the restroom, right? And you're
Yes.
selling jelly jars?
Yes.
Or were they full of jelly?
Yeah, there was a grocery store we were selling out.
And how'd that go?
Well, we were selling like strawberry jam, and he said, sell it by the jar, and they got to take them all. So if we had 5 jars or 50 jars, we sold it by the jar. So he said, start every one at 10 cents. So we go 10 cents, and we're selling them for like 17 cents. And Russell was, my dad, coming back from the restroom, and they had currant jelly, currant jam. And so I said, 5 cents, who gives 6, and I sold it for like 9 cents. And he raised Cain. He said, why in the world didn't you start it at 10? I told you to start them all at 10. I said, I don't like currant jelly. And no one else did either. So I lucked out on that one. I remember a sale in Pittsburgh where we were selling a guy's car, and he didn't think he got enough money. So he laid down in front of the car, got out and laid down in front of the car.
No, I wasn't there.
And he laid down and he said, unless they bid more, I'm not moving. I'm stopping the sale. And so we kept, well, the sale's over. Do you want to take the $12,000 or not? And he said, no, you get more money or I'm staying right here. The sale's over. I'm staying here. So we talked to him for about 15 minutes, and finally the cops grabbed his legs, pulled him out, and we drove the car out. And I think he ended up selling it for what we had bid. But that was a funny thing that happened I never had happened before.
Did you ever think, Stuart, that being an auctioneer would help you as a pastor because you get a degree in psychology, working with difficult people?
Very true. Very true. Auctions had a tendency to bring out the worst in some people. No question about it. Yep.
And the best in some others.
Yep. Yep.
Dad, what's your first recollection of that conversation, whether or not to have a classic car auction in Auburn?
The Chamber of Commerce needed some extra money to put the festival on every year, and they kept thinking of what they could do. And Del Johnson and John Martin Smith came to my father Russell and said, why don't we sell some of these collector cars? There's a lot of them with for sale signs on. And my dad said, well, I think we ought to. I think we ought to. So he got a hold of me and he said, do you think you would help get the cars in, and could you work the sale and help us and everything? And I said, sure I would. So that's what we did, and I think we had it out at the by the Dairy Queen on some bare ground out on the west side of Auburn, and it was like thousands of people came. We just were absolutely stunned.
Do you remember, I was riding in the car with you to the auction. I would have been 5 or 6 years old, and remember you couldn't get there.
That's right, the railroad tracks. I thought it was a train. The cars were backed up everywhere we went on the railroad tracks.
You thought it was a wrecked train?
And I thought it was a wrecked train or something because we went to several different roads. And finally I said, well, let's go on 69. So we went down to 69, crossed over the railroad. There wasn't any train there. And we pulled in off of the exit to go to the sale. We found out they were all there for the sale. We couldn't believe it. They charged $1 a piece to get in. They collected $7,800, plus there were thousands that just walked in because they just had a rope, a one-strand rope around it.
Russell had spoken to the guy on NBC News who did the morning news.
Frank Blair.
And he talked about it, right?
Yeah.
And there were only 75 cars in the auction, I think.
That's
is that right?
Yeah.
And so about, maybe as many as 15,000 people come to bid on those 75 cars.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happened that way? Was it the love for the automobile? Is it because there were no classic car auctions? What do you think?
I think a lot of it was that at that time people didn't know what the value of a collector car really was. And a lot of them owned cars and they paid $300 for them, and now they might be worth $3,000 or $5,000, and they didn't really know. So they thought, we'll come to this sale and just see how much they're worth, because it was the first time there was a market that was established of what the values were. People would go into banks to borrow money on their old cars, and the banks wouldn't loan them anything because they didn't, you'd look up a 1938 Ford and it was worth $400. But once we had these auctions around the country and we published all the prices, sent it to all the banks, it created a whole new economy on these collector cars, and the banks loaned them money.
Speaking of that, I think the most a Duesenberg had ever sold for at that time in 1971 was maybe 10,000. Most of them sold for less than 5,000. Do you remember? Were you auctioning the Duesenberg that day where NBC National News said two fools met?
Yep.
That brings 60,000?
67, I think, and
the seller wouldn't take it?
wouldn't take it, and NBC News says two fools met for a used car, and 67,000. The guy bid on it, which was nuts, and then the guy wouldn't sell it.
And today that car is worth a couple million or more?
Yeah, that was Ray Kaufman was the owner.
You were born the next year.
72.
And then in 73, I think the Auburn Car Duesenberg Museum started. I remember walking through the old building with you and John Martin Smith, and you were talking about the idea. Did you ever have the foresight of what that would become? And that I think it's 75,000 people a year just come to that, the museum?
Well, I thought walking through it, which I'd been through it several times, but I had not been through it to look to restore it. And as I walked through it, I thought there's a lot of nostalgia here. There's floors were brought in from Italy. The lights and chandeliers were from Italy. A lot of Art Deco in the stucco and the building of the facility itself. And it really was a beautiful, beautiful building. And so I thought maybe it would work. We could restore that. We could buy it, and we could have a museum there.
And it's amazing what it is today. It's just restored back to the new showroom floor, the terrazzo floors, the chandeliers.
People don't realize it till they come here. I had a guy come that owns 4 car magazines come to Auburn, and I took him through the museum, and he couldn't believe it. He said, I thought this was like an old gas station restored. He said, I had no idea this was this kind of a monster, beautiful Art Deco museum. And he did a big story about it when he got back.
Oh, terrific. It's amazing.
You know, I remember, I don't know, probably towards the end of when Dad had the Auburn auction there before he sold it off, but I was in his bus with him, and we were looking out the window and just saw the masses of people and the massive cars, 150,000 people, 5,000 cars. And I remember asking him, when it was behind the Dairy Queen, would you have ever dreamed in a million years that you would look out and see all of this, that it would grow to this? And he said, never in a million years. And it really is one of those unique things, and we talked about it that day of kind of what a blessing, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, that idea stumbled onto our family, and it mushroomed into what it was. When you think about such a small community, a town of 10,000 people, and you have an event that attracts people from literally all over the world, cars from all over the world, really an amazing thing that happened in this community that is just hard to believe, isn't it?
It is, yeah, especially if we had a good weekend. People would come in by the droves. They'd be backed up clear to Fort Wayne, Indiana on the interstate, and the other way north of Auburn just to get off and get in. We couldn't get them in fast enough.
What you said about how do you even recreate what happened there in Auburn with how many people and how many cars. I gave my life to trying to recreate it every weekend in other cities, and I realized, I could testify, this is something other than man's idea. This is unbelievable what was happening there, don't you think?
And I think it's the nostalgia of what Auburn was. They call it Little Detroit, that it it's true, isn't it, that it quite possibly could have become Detroit, had some things fallen in the right direction. With the Auburn's Cords being built here and Duesenbergs being sold here and the other cars that were built here. There's just so much nostalgia from a car standpoint in Auburn, I think, that added to the whole mystique of what was going on here.
I think that's true. The cars
I think
being
about
built
13 different makes of cars were built here in this area.
The Imp, the McIntyre, big list.
Yeah.
Think of all the people who have come.
Yeah.
Jay Leno, Oliver North, Wayne Newton.
I got a Wayne Newton story real quick.
Let's hear it.
The office staff, they were always upset with us because celebrities would come to the auction and they'd come out to the auction podium meet all of us, meet the people and all that, but they would never go back and meet the auction staff because just never thought about it, and they were celebrities were doing their thing. So Wayne Newton came, and I think of all the celebrities that ever came to Auburn, he epitomized the picture-perfect celebrity. He had the entourage.
He did.
He was tall, good-looking, the hair, dark skin. I mean, he just looked like any celebrity you'd ever dream of. He came out, talked to the audience, and I said, hey, our auction staff back there, they work really hard all weekend, and they never get to meet any celebrity. Would you mind just taking a few minutes, walk back through there, say hi to the ladies, that kind of thing? And he said, oh, I'd love to do it. So we walked back there, his entourage with him, and he's waving and smiling. Everybody's taking pictures and stuff. We go back, he says hi to all the ladies in the auction area, and they were really pleased and excited, got their picture with him. Got done with that, and as soon as we walked outside, this is when you knew you were with somebody important. As soon as we walked outside, he goes, oh man, it's bright out here, almost like Elvis or something. Oh man, it's bright. And as soon as he said that, one of his entourage guys goes, click, and had a sunglass case right in his face. He just kept walking, never missed a beat, grabbed the glasses, put them on, and kept walking.
And they were kind of like Elvis glasses,
oh,
weren't
yeah.
they?
Oh, yeah. And I said, man, that's living right there.
That is cool. That is cool. Larry Hagman, who we just lost recently, he was really, really a cool guy for being such a legendary status. I thought he and Jay Leno, well, gosh, I could
Reggie
do those.
Jackson
Even
was here several times. People liked him.
Yep, he was. They love. It's their hobby. They love it, and they're just good to the people around them, and the people respect them. And
When you go to some of their places, they all had posters of Auburn.
that is interesting. That's
Jay
true.
Leno had posters up.
Yep.
Wayne Newton had posters up, and so after I'd done that a few times, I got to thinking, what better gift could I give somebody than a poster? Because they always liked it, and so I would give them posters, and they really liked that.
To explain the reach that the Auburn event had, tell them about when you stopped at a restaurant. It could have been a McDonald's, but when you were in Russia, Moscow, Russia.
Yes, I was in Moscow, Russia at the McDonald's. Had to wait about 45 minutes, but my wife and I were tired of Russian food, and we waited there and waited in line. And I had at least 3 or 4 people come up and recognize me, and the sale had been to Auburn, Indiana.
In McDonald's in Moscow.
In McDonald's at Moscow. One guy had just been there that year, and he was all pepped up, and he was about 30 years old and was a swinger. Probably had some kind of a nightclub or something where he made a lot of money. But he really was he just yelled out, Dean Kruse. He comes running over.
That makes me think about the time that Dad and I think Kenny was there. I can't remember if you were there, and we were in Florida. And Dad was driving the rent-a-car. And I saw 2 state troopers meeting with each other, and they had a Bible out, so I figured they were good guys. It sounded like one was kind of mentoring or counseling the other. And so I walked up to the state trooper, and I said to one of them, and I said, that's my dad over there. Could you just tell him to slow it down? He goes, no problem. So Dad had just come off that Moscow, Russia thing. Remember, he's telling everybody, I was in the Moscow McDonald's, and the guy said, Dean Kruse. Yep. So the state trooper walks up to Dad and says, slow it down, sir. And Dad goes, huh? Yes, I'm Dean Kruse. And he shakes his hand, and the state trooper said, I said, slow it down, sir. Dad goes, what? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then he goes, your son put me up to this. And Dad goes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. What? Ah! I tell you, speaking of Dad being a politician and a salesman, how he handles things. We were driving in Florida on another occasion, and we had an auction on one side of the state, on the Atlantic Ocean side, on the east side, and we were going to go across Alligator Alley and go up to Sarasota for the auction on the other side the next day. And so Dad, and then Jim Ritchie's in the rent-a-car behind him, and Dad goes across Alligator Alley, and Dad, there's nothing in Alligator Alley, right?
Especially at midnight.
Yeah, it was really late. And Dad wanted to see how fast the car would go, and the speedometer's buried past 110 miles an hour. Well, Dad gets across Alligator Alley, and Jim's following him, and he gets on, probably, it might have been 75, but it's the north-south highway there. And Dad continues to drive 110 miles an hour, Okay? All of a sudden, we see these flashing lights. And the state trooper pulls over both cars. And I knew Jim Ritchie was going to put the ticket on his expense report.
Is this why we signed that thing before we came on the show?
Yeah.
Releasing us from these things?
So the state trooper comes up and asks Dad, "Sir, can I ask what you've been doing?" And Dad said, "Well, we just came across Alligator Alley." He says, "Sir, I clocked you in the car behind you at 110 miles an hour. Sir, were you driving 110 miles an hour across Alligator Alley?" And I thought, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? And it's like time stopped. And I'm just sitting there wondering, what is he going to say? And I said, because, is he going to say yes? What? And then what's going to happen?
Right.
Is he going to say no and feel good about lying to him? And Dad puts his hands on his chest and he looks at the state trooper and he goes, "I certainly hope not." So the Auburn auction continued to grow, and then remember when cars started to get really valuable, and I went to Dr. Watson and said, "Doc, we need to have this auction at DeKalb High School. We need to have it in the gym. The cars got to be inside. They're getting too expensive, and the people, need a better venue." And I remember he took me down in the cellar and he tore out the blueprint that I needed and he let us take out the door and have the car inside. And the auction just goes to a whole new level.
Filled the whole gymnasium.
It was just amazing. It was just amazing. I think one of the last auction there at the school, I think, is when we sold like 7 of 13 Duesenbergs or something.
Well,
it was
4 o'clock in the morning was towards the end of the sale. We sold Don Williams a car. He went to the hotel, set the alarm for 3 o'clock, got up at 3, come up at 4, and bought the car for like $3.5 million at 4 in the morning, which was crazy. That's when we started going to 6 days and all kinds of stuff.
So we remember General Motors had just purchased all the land for their plant, and people who held out at the end got a lot of money. So you and I said, let's do the auction park at State Road 8, and we go down that road on west of State Road 8, and everybody said they would sell. And then we handed them the offer to purchase, and everybody wanted more money. They wouldn't do it. So you and I came to this next exit, and we talked to the guy who owned most of the land here, the farm.
Barney Dove.
Yep, World War II ace. And he said, "I won't sell." And we made him an offer, and he accepted it.
Yep.
And there was the Kruse Auction Park, the first one in the world. That first sale was special. That was amazing.
It was.
And then you remind me of...
we had it under a big tent.
Yep.
1,200-foot tent.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
Wasn't it the biggest tent you could get, wasn't it?
Yeah, the biggest tent in the United States, I think, maybe the world. And then I'm pretty sure it was 1997 and 1998. It just went to a whole nother level. I think we're auctioning like $35 million worth of cars are selling. And we had all those on ESPN2 Live with a celebrity auction segment. It was our highest rated show in the history of the network.
All the auction shows, car auction shows you see on television today started with that ESPN broadcast back here in Auburn.
We were on the Financial News Network first, and then they sold out, and it became CNBC, and it was their highest-rated show ever on a Labor Day. And then we went to ESPN2, but it was just amazing, like how everything was clicking. Well, any other stories you want to share before we go?
Not right now. I can't think of any.
Dad?
No, we just had lots of them. I had a guy one time open up his trunk, and about 5 women all jumped out.
And that's all the time we have today.
What do you mean?
And I've had other guys come up to the microphone and start yelling and shouting how great the car is and everything. And I had another guy would give a $100 bill for every 1,000 bids somebody gave. He had a whole pocket full of them.
That is cool.
Yeah.
One positive thing came out of auction life was there was a guy that was, unfortunately, he was an alcoholic. And there was a night here at Auburn where things got out of control. And when his fire truck came through, I won't go into the details of what happened, but it was pretty risque.
Don't worry, Dad will.
Yeah. But it was so humiliating to that guy after he supped it off and thought about it that he gave up drinking altogether.
Really?
Yep. He was really apologetic about it, and it changed his life, so I guess.
And you made me think of another auction story. I were in Scottsdale, Arizona, and a guy approached me right before the sale started, and he said, I just want to tell you something. He said, I have a heart problem, and I needed an angioplasty process done on my heart, a procedure done on my heart. And he said, I was out of money, and all I had was my car. He said, you sold my car yesterday for enough money that I get to have that procedure and get to be taken care of. And it just gave me a whole new perspective of why people are selling their cars. And to go back to what Dad was always taught, Dad, about the fried chicken and the iron skillet, you want to say?
Yeah, when I was in auction school, Guy Pettit was one of the great auctioneers in America, and he taught there. And he says, just let me tell you about the auction business. Whatever you're selling, you got to sell the sizzle, not what you have. He said one auctioneer can sell an iron skillet for $5. Another auctioneer can sell the skillet and get up to $5 and stop and say, now just a minute. Do you remember when your grandma used to make fried chicken in an iron skillet? Do you remember that smell of that chicken and you got so hungry you couldn't hardly take it? And then when she put it out, it was so crispy and so good that you ate all you could eat, 2 or 3 pieces of it. That's what we're selling here today. Can't you just smell that chicken? And it'd go bring $20 or $30.
Sell the sizzle.
Yep.
And that's why Dad always taught us to sell every item like it was our own.
Yep.
And we were 2 months behind on the mortgage payment.
Yep.
And I think that was one of the greatest compliments we ever had. I don't remember what show was being filmed, but one of the customers said that exact thing. He said, I don't care if you're selling a $1,000 motorcycle or a multi-million-dollar Duesenberg. The Kruse family gives 100% every time, no matter what they're selling. And I'm not bragging on ourselves when I say that. I'm just saying that's something Dad taught us, Russell taught us, and I think that was a good thing we brought to our customers. We just gave 100% no matter what. And it's a good lesson in life that no matter who you're with, whether they're the lowest of low or the high celebrity, you treat everybody the same. You treat everybody as they're important to God, so they're important to us. And I think it's a good life lesson that we learned.
Yes. Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do it with all your heart. Thanks for being here, guys.
No
Thanks
problem.
for having us.
We know you.
You know, when I volunteered as a teaching pastor, I recognized the need for a restoration curriculum. And that's why we wrote Restoration Road. And it includes a study guide and a DVD that can be used for an individual or in small groups so that people can learn how to live authentically from the inside out. Get your copies today at therestorationroad.com.